Hey, I'm Samantha Salmon, National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach, and today I want to point you to the blog, rawfoodmealplanner.com. On the blog, I have an article that I wrote called Rethinking Diabetes, 7 Eye-Opening Truths Every Woman Should Know. And I'm going to quickly go through those 7 truths, right? But you can go to the blog and dive in more deeper into it. But the first main thing is fruit isn't the enemy. I recently actually was on a panel with a nurse practitioner who helps people get into insulin sensitivity utilizing the keto diet. So just so I can explain foundationally, the mechanism of action behind type 2 diabetes is insulin resistance, meaning insulin is not able to get into the muscle and liver cells to usher the sugar into those cells and out of the bloodstream, right? So it's called insulin resistance. So in order to get out of a type 2 diabetic diagnosis, what you want is insulin sensitivity, meaning the insulin is able to usher the glucose into the muscle and liver cells. Now, what the keto people talk about is that the fact that you're eating sugar, even if it's coming from fruit, and that's putting demands on insulin, and that's why you have high blood sugar, right? But they are not finishing the whole story. The whole story is that why is the insulin, which the insulin's whole job is to get the sugar into the muscle and liver cells, right? And if that's not happening, why is that not happening? It's not because we're not supposed to be eating fruit. Remember now, humans have been on the planet for millennia, right? And there was a long period of time, right, before fire was discovered. So when you think about it, fruit was our first food, actually. And so it makes no sense. We would be extinct as a species if fruit wasn't helpful or needed for our survival. And not only that, you think about the fact that our brain and body has evolved over millennia on this food, right? So it's something we need. We need sugar. Our body, our brain runs on sugar, right? When you're in a stress situation, if you're being chased by police or by a crocodile, I'm down here in Florida, right? You need sugar. Glucose is being sent to your extremities so that you can run in this situation, right? So we need that, right? That's how these athletes are able to do what they're doing on sugar, on glucose, right? And this is natural sugar that is easily metabolized by the body. I'm not talking about refined sugar, right? But so to think that we need to not have fruit is just unconscionable and is dangerous, okay? Ultimately, if you have a type 2 diabetes diagnosis and you want to get into insulin sensitivity, you have to clear the fat out of the cells, and that is why the insulin is not able to bring the sugar into those cells. Because when you have lipids clogging up the cell, it's not able to get the sugar in there. That's what insulin resistance is. So for type 2 diabetics, I know my grandmother, when she was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and the whole time, like, she had a sweet tooth. She loved cookies and things like this, cakes and stuff like that. And I feel like she would have really loved to know that not only could she eat sweet things, but she could also reverse the type 2 diabetes and not be dependent on a finger prick every morning or insulin shot to the belly and all these pills and medications she was on. She could actually enjoy sweet foods that God has gifted us because our bodies and our cells need it, and be healthy and not be dependent on the medical system. Actually get into a place where she doesn't have all of these diagnoses and comorbidities. I think this is what quality of life is, and that's what I help my clients do. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, craving sweets. Don't restrict, but redirect with fiber-rich sweet foods, and that's basically what I'm alluding to here. You don't have to get rid of your craving for sweets. You just have to focus on fiber-rich foods. So where can you get fiber-rich foods that are also sweet? And that's your fruit category. But there's also some vegetables in there, like sweet potatoes, right? So we have lots of options available to us. Number 3, blood sugar is about more than just sugar. When it comes to diabetes in particular, what you're eating does matter, but it's not the only thing that matters. There are people who are dealing with lots of stress. They're not sleeping well. They're not emotionally doing well. High cortisol puts high demands on insulin. I think I mentioned just now that if you're in an emergency situation and you have to run, right? This is adrenaline surging in your body, cortisol surging, which is a stress response. And our brain has evolved over this millennia, right, to operate in a certain way. So with that, it's like you need to fight or flee this situation. And in order to do that, we need sugar in the extremities. So how do we get sugar into those muscle cells? We need insulin to bring it in there, right? To usher it in there. And so you're going to have high demands of insulin when cortisol is high. Also, and I'm just avoiding all of the food related stuff, right? But adjacent to that is physical activity. So I know for me personally, when I'm stressed out, it's physical activity that helps to calm my brain and nervous system down, right? When my anterior cingulate is ruminating over things, strength training works really well for me. Going for a walk, going for a run, especially if I'm heated, or just even in shame and fear, all of these anxious feelings, frustration, all of this stuff, I take it into my workout. I go outside, or maybe I'm inside and lifting heavy. I need to sweat. I need to use these muscles and also release those stress hormones and just detox, right? Detox my mind and my whole spirit. And this helps me with that. And when you exercise, it's utilizing up those blood sugars. So it helps with insulin sensitivity. Substance abuse, smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, these things will also impact blood sugar. Number 4, weight. So excess fat can contribute to a type 2 diabetes diagnosis. I actually consider excess fat is it's a symptomology, actually. Whatever the lifestyle is that is causing the excess fat accumulation is also then causing, because whatever you're using that's causing the excess fat is also contributing to the insulin resistance, right? However, there are people who are at a normal weight that end up with a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. So you don't have to be overweight or obese or anything like that to get type 2 diabetes. If you're at a healthy weight, you could get type 2 diabetes. And why is that? Moving aside genetics, right? Because genetics is about 10 to 20% of any kind of chronic disease diagnosis. So we have so much that we can work on in that 80 to 90%, right? So beyond that, there's metabolic dysfunction, there's environmental exposures, for example, mold toxicity, right? That's one of the things that came up in the last health conference that I was at, was that if you have been exposed to mycotoxins, which is basically mold toxicity, it can elevate your blood sugar, right? And make you insulin resistant. There's hormonal imbalances also that can cause that, because all the hormones, insulin is a hormone, and the hormones run on a hierarchy. And when one is off, it throws others out of whack, right? There's more nuance to this. And I also mentioned metabolic dysfunction just to explain that a little bit. Metabolic syndrome, also known as insulin resistance syndrome, is a group of conditions that occur together and increase the risk of serious health problems. So at least 3 of the following 5 metabolic risk factors must be present to be diagnosed with metabolic syndrome. That's abdominal obesity is 1. So if you're of a healthy weight, this doesn't apply to you. But you can also have high triglyceride levels of 150 milligrams per deciliter or higher. You can have a low HDL cholesterol level, which would be less than 50 milligrams per deciliter for women, less than 40 milligrams per deciliter for men. High blood pressure, 130/85 or higher, and high fasting blood sugar, which is 100 milligrams per deciliter or higher. You could be of a healthy weight with high fasting blood sugar, high blood pressure, low HDL cholesterol, and high triglyceride levels. And any three of those, you would be diagnosed with metabolic syndrome. And so this can contribute to a type 2 diabetes diagnosis, even if you're at a healthy weight. So that's something to keep in mind. Number 5, diabetes affects the whole body, not just your blood sugar. And I know I find in my practice that when I talk to people with a diabetes diagnosis, it doesn't really rock them. They feel like, oh, I could just maintain on these meds. But from what I've learned in my experience with my grandmother is that maintaining on meds is not the business. We don't want to do that because ultimately the body is getting worse and is basically deteriorating. While you're dealing with this, right, you have the liver being affected, brain, muscles, the gut microbiome, your immune system, right? So it puts you at risk for all these things. And then you need all of this additional medication to counter all the damage that's being done, because the high blood sugar is not really being addressed. The root cause is not being addressed. And number 6, terminology matters a lot. So instead of saying someone's a diabetic, right, we need to be saying people living with diabetes or patients with diabetes, right? I have been working on person-centered languaging since the pandemic, right? We started having this whole conversation about, how we talk about people in community development, also in health, because the words really do have power. And especially with something like this, when it comes to health, we don't want to claim diseases as our own, because that can kind of mess with the mind a little bit, where we hold on to this thing instead of doing what we need to do to get rid of it when we do have the opportunity to do that. And with type 2 diabetes, we know that it's a preventable and reversible disease. And instead of claiming the identity of I'm a diabetic, you don't have to be a diabetic forever if it's a type 2 diabetes diagnosis or gestational or something like this. One of the ones that are reversible, and not all of them are. And then number 7, lastly, diabetes isn't cured, but it can go into remission. And this is something, again, language that I am still working on, because I have historically always used the word reversal. But according to the literature, and I do want to be in alignment with the medical literature, the right terminology is remission instead of reversal. Obviously, there's no cure because it's a lifestyle. You don't go on a diet to get into remission and then come off of it, because then you're just going to fall right back into it. And I honestly encourage folks, even folks who are on a cancer journey, because I've seen with my colleagues in the field who have been on a cancer journey, they did all the things to get out of that and went into remission, but then switched up their diet to the standard American diet, and the cancer came right back with a vengeance. We don't want to do this. This is not, and this is why I don't get into diet wars with people, because I am not pushing a diet. I am encouraging folks to live a healthy lifestyle, right? That is in alignment with how our bodies have evolved to function. And it hasn't evolved to function on a high fat keto diet. It just hasn't, right? Even the way these carnivore people are talking about the Paleolithic diet is not actually based in facts that you can find in the literature, right? It's not factual. So really be mindful of where you're getting your information from. And with that, I will leave you to read the rest of the blog at rawfoodmealplanner.com, and I'll make sure to post the link in the description to this video. I have some other great resources there for you. And if this is something you're interested in getting your body in shape, physically, mentally, emotionally, I have an amazing program for you called the Brain Health Breakthrough Coaching Program. I haven't been able to make videos as frequently as I would like to because all of my effort and focus is really in this program, where every Thursday we have memory rescue mastermind sessions where we're doing raw food demos. We are talking about how to improve cognitive function through using food as medicine. And the program is geared basically to improve three things: cognitive function, energy, and dropping the stress, right? Because we've already talked extensively today about how much stress can impact our metabolic health. So if you are interested and you want to learn more, again, I have resources for you in the description to this video, and please do share this with someone that you know and love who may be dealing with a diabetes diagnosis. I think we can never know enough about diabetes, especially with all the new stuff that folks are talking about. Thanks to all the misinformation that's being spread on the internet, it has folks talking about things like fasting glucose and continuous glucose monitors and stuff like this. So there's always something new to learn and dive into. So with that, have a blessed day.